Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome one and all to episode number 23 of The Adventure Continues, a Star Trek discussion, a bi-weekly Saturday night show where each and every other week we will take a look at one specific episode from either the original series, the animated series, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, or Enterprise in the Gene Roddenberry and Rick Berman eras of Star Trek. And for tonight, there is no special guest. You have just the captain himself, me, and I'm going to watch and discuss with all of you the episode that made me realize that I am a fan of not just the original series, but of the franchise with tonight's Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. Now, this episode aired in 1990 as part of season 3 of The Next Generation. Still a few episodes away from the big finale, big cliffhanger of that particular season, which was the best of both worlds. But this was the episode that gave me a what if situation as far as a fan is concerned, as far as a fan who had been watching primarily the original series before getting into Star Trek The Next Generation and trying to warm up to it, but not exactly liking the show as much as I liked the original series until, of course, tonight's featured episode of Yesterday's Enterprise. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about the episode because I do invite you all to join me over in Cosme. And to do that, all you have to do is click on to the Cosme link that is pinned to the top of the chat. And you can join me over there. And you can watch tonight's featured episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Yesterday's Enterprise, of course. This episode does bring back a familiar character from season 1 in Tasha Yar. It also brings in Christopher McDonald, who plays a character known as Lieutenant Castillo. But a lot of you might know Christopher McDonald as Shooter McGavin from the Happy Gilmore movie, and of course its sequel, Happy Gilmore 2. And so I am already over in Cosme, but again, if anybody would like to watch tonight's episode along with me, just click on that Cosme link pinned to the top of the chat on both YouTube and Rumble, on the vertical and horizontal feeds over on YouTube. And we will get underway with the episode, and I'll keep that information up during this entire episode. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and it's time to engage. There's Worf and Guinan in 10 forward, and Worf's going to try something for the very first time. He's shocked by the taste of it. He's shocked by the taste of prune juice. And there you hear him dub it a warrior's drink. That's not entirely true, of course. For those of you familiar with Deep Space Nine, Worf would come on to Deep Space Nine, and maybe he wouldn't get involved in a relationship with a human woman, but he would get involved with one particular trill, the Jadzia Dax. But Worf seems to be enjoying his prune juice. And Worf's saying he's considering the safety of his crewmates because he is a Klingon. He's much stronger than your average human. And he doesn't want to hurt any of his female crewmates. And there you see there's some kind of anomaly. Oh, it's a time displacement. Yeah, something's happening, and for those of you who are over in Cosme, keep watching because you're gonna see something happen on screen. It's a Federation starship coming out of that anomaly. And notice how they did that transition with the effect, and then Picard turns around, and instead of Worf standing at the tactical station, it's Tasha Yar. And Guinan's looking around in 10 forward, everything has changed. Yet she knows it's a change. How is it possible that that's the Enterprise's predecessor? Well, keep watching to find out. Lady Miss, good to see you this evening over on the Cosme side. So I was 12 years old when this episode first aired, and like I said in the beginning, this was the episode that made me realize I wasn't just a fan of Star Trek itself, but also the franchise. And I officially became a fan of Star Trek The Next Generation at this point. I hope your evening's been well, Lady Mist. And for anybody who might be joining Lady Mist and I over in Cosby, I let the intro play for each and every episode. And if you haven't clicked on that Cosby link, go ahead. You're more than welcome to join. Just gonna change one thing real quick, folks. Still keeping the episode going, just making it full screen. It has gone well. And if you notice, Picard didn't say stardate, he said military log. We're gonna find out more information as the episode goes along. And notice how on this version of the Enterprise there's more stations on the bridge. It was always neat to me whenever they would take the sets in any of the series and redress them and make some additions, make some subtractions, and of course, this episode was directed by David Carson, who had also directed Star Trek Generations, Padawan, good to see you, brother. Yes, it could alter the flow of the Enterprise D's history. Of course, they don't mention it because it's not mentioned so much later, but there is the Temporal Prime Directive, and you don't want to interfere with that. I hope you're doing well tonight, Padawan. And of course, Picard's not going to reveal that he's the captain of the Enterprise, especially with a ship from the past called the Enterprise and Picard's current present. And there you see the Ambassador class Starship Enterprise. Now, I do have some images that I'm going to show after we're done watching the episode of Andrew Probert's original concept design for the Enterprise C. And of course, Major Boo Boo happens very quickly here. There's the Boo Boo. Beverly mentioning the Enterprise. They were told not to mention it, and Beverly mentions it. And of course, the Enterprise C bridge is a redress of the Battle Bridge set, which was also the original set for Star Trek: The Motion Picture and the Wrath of Khan. I know you're just teasing, Pat. And there's Christopher McDonald. Like I said earlier, some of you may recognize him as Shooter McGavin. I appreciate that, Pat. Thank you very much, brother. And Guidance come to the bridge. Something she rarely, if ever, does. Now, as far as that version of the Enterprise D crew is concerned, everything is right. But if you also notice in this episode, Deanna's not on the bridge. So that means A, that Beta said was not a member of the Federation, or B, the Klingons may have conquered Beta said. No. In this one, it was Beverly who had the slip where she mentions the Enterprise. And of course, Picard being shocked that there's supposed to be children on the Enterprise. And of course, if anyone recalls from Encounter at Farpoint, he says to Commander Riker, I'm not a family man, Riker. You're going to need to help me present a face where I enjoy being around children because he didn't enjoy being around children. And now Picard's put into a tough situation. Does he go by Guinan's word and send the Enterprise C back, or does he keep the Enterprise C in that 24th century alternate timeline? Nice try, dude. Only thing I'm seeing is that he faces surgery after a horse riding accident. Yeah, he revealed that he fell off the horse. He's fine. I get that, Pat. So now you have this meeting between the two captains. Captain Garrett's being briefed on current events of Picard's 24th century, 22 years after the reported disappearance of the Enterprise C from Narendra 3. Not only would a Federation starship stopping the Romulans from attacking a Klingon outpost prevented 20 years of war, you would have also had Worf, because Worf was only 6 years old when he was with his father and mother at Narendra 3, and that's why Worf isn't there. See, they don't know anything about their family as far as the crew members of the Enterprise C, whether members of their family are still alive or whether they've passed on. And yes, sir. Yes, sir, Pat. So now you have both the Enterprise C crew and Enterprise D crew trying to get the Enterprise C back up and functioning enough to send them back through the rift. And Picard's getting an assessment from Data as far as what would happen if they sent the Enterprise C back through the rift, to where they conclude that sending the Enterprise C back through the rift would ultimately lead to the ship's destruction. A lot of officers in Star Trek feel honored and privileged to be assigned to a ship named Enterprise, considering the legacy that the Enterprise has in all of Star Trek. And there you have the classic debate between a chief medical officer and a ship's captain. What's the angry face for, Lady Mist? See, Picard's put in a dilemma here. He trusts Guided, but he doesn't know that sending the Enterprise C back is the right decision. See, this is one of those classic damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, with that being said, is Picard going to use his trust in Guinan to do what must be done, or is he going to keep the Enterprise C in the 24th century, 22 years later, and have them help in the war effort? A war that, again, is not supposed to be happening. And there you see the first meeting between Tasha and Guinan. So Tasha orders a couple of TKLs and their rations just to let everybody know. MREs essentially. Program the ship for an automated defense attack. Send the ship and keep the people. Shouldn't cause any problems. It would cause a lot of temporal problems, Phantom Wannabe. Temporal headaches. Yep. Tasha didn't like that look Guinan just gave her. See, and now the senior staff is questioning how does Guinan know that this isn't the right future? And of course, some of the subtle little differences that you see in Picard's ready room is there's no painting of the Enterprise D on his wall, and there's no fish tank that you can see. No pets, no families, and no Klingon tactical officer because unfortunately, in this altered timeline, Narendra 3 was destroyed, and Worf and his family unfortunately didn't make it. So there you hear it. Picard's going with Guinan's recommendation. Ooh, that's chilling in front of Tasha. Who knows if we're even dead or alive? And of course, for those of you who don't know, and those that you do know, and of course, with this particular live stream, I do give away spoilers. But Tasha died in season one in the episode Skin of Evil because Denise Crosby didn't see her character going anywhere, so she asked to leave the show. The Enterprise, Chad. Of course, we don't know if Tasha and Data found out how functional Data was in this timeline, like we did in the original. So they're still conducting repairs on the Enterprise C. getting her ship shape. And of course, Trisha O'Neill is Captain Rachel Garrett. This isn't her first appearance in Star Trek: The Next Generation. She also played a Klingon in the season 6 episode. And I'll go ahead and put those episodes that she appeared in on screen here in just a moment. All right, so I'm going to bring this up from Memory Alpha. It's a fan site dedicated to Star Trek. Give me a second to bring it up. Let me bring that down. And I'll make that a little bigger so those of you watching on your computer screens, TVs, or tablets, or any other devices can see this. So, of course, you're seeing her here in yesterday's Enterprise, but she was also correct in the 6th season episode Suspicions. And that episodes where a group of scientists come aboard the Enterprise, and there's a Ferengi scientist who developed metaphasic shielding, which allows a ship to enter a star's chronosphere. And she was also considered for the role of Alpaca, as it says here on Deep Space Nine. 2 years later, it says she played Carinas in Deep Space Nine, the 3rd season episode Defiant. Of course, Carinas was a Cardassian. So she's got quite a few credits, as you can see. But there she is as her Cardassian character in Deep Space Nine. And here's her in Suspicions. And again, for anyone that's just joining, if you'd like to watch the episode, just click on the Cosme link pinned to the top of the chat while the live stream is going and the episode is going. And now Lieutenant Castillo is requesting permission to take command of the Enterprise C and continue on with its mission to go into the past and prevent this alternate future. He's persistent. But Picard's giving him permission to go. Obviously, they were building a connection between Lieutenant Castile and Lieutenant Yar as they embrace. Lady Mist. And now Castile's back on the Enterprise C after being beamed over. I'm sure that's not the first time that transported tech has seen somebody smooch with their significant other or soon to be significant other or playing. And here's the reveal. Tasha is supposed to be dead. And you know that line, "an empty death, a death without purpose," that could also be kind of the writer's way of saying, we really should have chosen a better way to kill off the character instead of how Armis and Skin of Evil actually kills her. Hello, Helion. How are you doing tonight? And now Tasha's requested to be transferred to the Enterprise C. But Picard knows that Tasha and Guinan talked. You need a nap? Well, go and get yourself a nap. I do appreciate you stopping by. And Picard's trying to give Tasha a reality check. If she goes back, the Enterprise C will be destroyed, and she'll die anyway. Ah, you gotta have some dinner before you go to bed. I get it. And there you go. Another time where a character in Star Trek says that they know the risk wearing the uniform. And Picard grants Tasha permission to become a member of the Enterprise C crew. And of course, the uniforms that they're wearing on the Enterprise C are just modifications to the motion picture maroon uniforms that they started wearing in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Castillo doesn't want Tasha there, but Tasha says she needs to be there. And here's the last act of the episode. And imagine that, an episode where Wesley wasn't insufferable. A great line is spoken here. Let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise. And there you see the Klingon birds of prey attacking the Enterprise. And since the Enterprise D is capable of firing 10 photon torpedoes at once, they've hit one Klingon bird of prey. And this is one of the few episodes where you actually see phaser fire from the Enterprise from the view screen's viewpoint. And the Enterprise D is taking a lot of damage. One ship has been destroyed. And things are just getting worse than engineering. And things have gone from bad to worse as there's a warp core breach in progress. And why do there always have to be rocks coming out of the consoles after they explode? The Federation must have a surplus in rocks. And Picard's making one valiant last stand to allow the Enterprise to see enough time to get into the rift. And now everything's been restored. Yep. Worf and Deanna are on the bridge. For that instant, time was never changed. And there you do see an actual mistake where they have Geordi still wearing the alternate timeline uniform with the slaves. But that, ladies and gentlemen, was yesterday's Enterprise. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. No, we're not watching Fraser, everybody. Sorry. Nothing against Fraser, but it's not called Fraser The Adventure Continues. It's called Star Trek The Adventure Continues. As I like to call it. But yes, that was tonight's episode of yesterday's Enterprise. And for me, like I said, this was the episode that sealed the deal when it came to the Star Trek franchise. And it made me realize I am a Star Trek fan because you have a story where you get a possible outcome if the Enterprise C hadn't stopped the Romulans from attacking the outpost at Naranda 3 and helping out the Klingons. You see a future where there is no Worf on the Enterprise. There is no Deanna on the Enterprise. Tasha's still alive, but everything as far as what we've known has changed. And you see, the Federation's in bad shape. They're losing the war against the Klingons. And they don't have much long to survive. They estimate that within 6 months, the Federation will be gone if the war continues. So the fact that you have Picard put into a dilemma, do I or do I not trust Guinan's intuition and send the Enterprise C back and repair this supposed damage to the timeline? Or do I keep them here? Of course, you have Captain Rachel Garrett, who sees it as an opportunity to do what she was already doing with her crew, and that's responding to the distress call as the Romulans were attacking the outpost on Narenda 3. And so Picard ultimately realizes in this episode he has to send the Enterprise C back, even when you have Riker protesting. And of course, Crusher is even questioning it, and that's Beverly Crusher, not Wesley Crusher. But one thing I do want to show everybody, and it's something that you kind of wish they would have done, and that it would have been approved. But unfortunately, it wasn't. But you saw the Enterprise C as it was in this episode. I'll go ahead and bring it up on screen here. So let me bring that down so you all can see it. That's how the Enterprise C looked in this episode. But what if I were to tell you that Andrew Probert had a different design for the Enterprise C, one that you do see in the observation lounge whenever Picard and crew are having a meeting? And the Enterprise C was supposed to look drastically different, more of a connection between another Federation starship that we know. But this was Andrew Probert's original design for the Enterprise C. There you see, it's got more ties to the Excelsior class with this section right here. And you see some elements that do connect it to the Future Galaxy class, but look at the nacelle pylons. They go out, then they angle up here. And the back is longer on the star drive section. The saucer is much bigger compared to what we see here. And again, the reason why we see this version of the Enterprise C as opposed to this version is because supposedly this version right here was never officially approved. So Doug Drexler and crew who worked on the models for Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise constructed this version, which was ultimately approved. Of course, you can't have this lead into the Enterprise D unless you have what also helped inspire it, and that's the Excelsior class. There you see the neck right here is very similar to what you see on the official version of the Enterprise C and the concept for the Enterprise C. They all have that grid area, just like the Excelsior. Of course, the Enterprise B was an Excelsior class. It looks like the original Excelsior when we see it on the observation lounge during the early seasons of Next Generation. Of course, then they add the extension to the outside of the hull for Generations when we actually do see the Enterprise B on C during its commissioning ceremony. Of course, that's the same commissioning ceremony that Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov were a part of. But again, they ultimately went with this design of the Enterprise C, and I honestly would love it if they actually made this starship official and we actually do get to see it in some media form or another. Because I actually prefer this design more than this design right here. True Rock, how are you doing tonight? You never liked the Excelsior. You're not the only one I know who doesn't particularly care for the Excelsior design. And, you know, I get it. It's different from what we've seen, especially when you had the Constitution class for all those years. But, you know, you could also see how we go from the Excelsior to the official Enterprise C, and then let me just go ahead and remove myself just real quick, folks. I'll remove this too. But you'll see what I'm going to put on screen that's right behind. So yeah, we get the Enterprise D, and again, I would have preferred the original design for the Enterprise C, but not my call. But yesterday's Enterprise is one of the best episodes of Next Generation, and it does get the fanfare, and rightfully so. But like I said, it's also the episode that made me realize I'm not just a fan of Star Trek; I'm a fan of the franchise and Next Generation as a whole. So, any comments or questions you all have for me? I'd love to hear them. Is there a particular episode of any series that you consider your favorite, and it was the one that made you realize you were a fan of that particular Enterprise? Your favorite is the Enterprise A. You know, my favorite design tree rock is the refit of the Constitution class. It just is the perfect blend of the original and what you would expect to be the upgraded version of the Enterprise. It's sleek lines and everything. I mean, I don't have a still at the ready of it, but I'll go ahead and bring this up and I'll take myself away from the screen. Just find the right video. I think this is it right. No, that's not it. This is it right here. I'm going to take myself away here in just a second so you can see it. But yeah, it's the refit. Yeah, I mean, yes, I know what they say about the motion picture that would you're seeing the refit of the Enterprise. That scene takes forever, but you're being introduced to another character because the Enterprise itself is a character, just like the Enterprise D is a character. Deep Space Nine is a character. The Defiant is a character. Voyager, whether you like Voyager or not, is a character. And Tree Rock says, I can't pick one episode of Star Trek as my favorite episode. There are so many good ones. Yeah, there are. And he also says, thanks. And Lady Miss says, she can't think of a particular favorite episode of a series. Just she's thanks for the Super Star Trek show today. Well, I knew at some point in the course of the Adventure Continues, the Star Trek discussion, that I would let you all know what my particular favorite episodes are. Yes, for episode 2, I had DJ Ronnie G with me on to watch and discuss with all of you Tomorrow is Yesterday. That was the episode that made me realize I was a fan of the original series. And yes, that was a time travel episode where the Enterprise goes back in time. However, in this case, for yesterday's Enterprise, there's an Enterprise from the past that comes to the future and shows you an alternate timeline where the Federation isn't all so peachy keen and rosy, and everybody's getting along for the most part. And Tree Rock says that the motion picture equals the first time I saw the Enterprise unpowered, powered, impulse power, warp speed, and photons. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was quite the feat back in '79 to actually get all those effects. I mean, even having the warp nacelles illuminated as the ship's traveling in that warp, and you finally see the impulse engines glowing, showing that they are operational, and actually seeing the photon torpedo fire from a torpedo bay as opposed to the original series. And Helion says she feels like Penny on Big Bang. Well, this is what I love, Helion. I've always loved Star Trek, and I don't like what current Star Trek is. I've tried watching it. I watched season 1 of Picard. I watched season 2 of Picard. I even watched season 3 of Picard. But there were still things about that show I did not like. It, everything just seems so depressing to me. There's no optimism. There's no showing that we as humans have still continued to better ourselves in Star Trek's future. It's all so depressing. We're all against each other. They hit you with the hammer with current day politics instead of doing as Star Trek always did before, and use today's conflicts and everything that's going on as a metaphor. And when it comes to this particular era of Star Trek, Next Generation gave us not just one more show, but three more shows. It gave us Deep Space Nine, it gave us Voyager, and gave us Enterprise. For this particular era of Star Trek, it gave us 18 years of consistent Star Trek, which was unheard of. I mean, the reason why I say it's unheard of is because you go from the original series, which was on from 1966 to 1969. So 3 seasons. And then you have to wait until 1973 when you get the animated series. So you had to wait 4 years before you got anything of Star Trek on TV. So it's 73, 74, you get the 22 episodes of the animated series. And then it was 5 years later that you finally got Star Trek the Motion Picture after they had already approved a Star Trek series, Star Trek Phase 2. And then, of course, the success of Star Wars couldn't be ignored. And Paramount's like, what do we got? Well, we got Star Trek. So they take what was supposed to be an episode for Star Trek Phase 2 and expand it to a full on motion picture, which was in its own right successful. But of course, the Wrath of Khan comes later on, and that's done by the TV side of things instead of the motion picture side. So you have from 79 all the way up to 1986, where you have the Wrath of Khan, then you have Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, you have The Voyage Home, and then you find out that Gene Roddenberry is working on a new Star Trek series. That Paramount wants to put a new Star Trek television series on the air, but this one's going to be in syndication. So it had been a while up to 1987. 73, 74, and then 1987. So, that's a long while in between before Star Trek actually returned to television, weekly television, where you actually got 26 episodes of a live action weekly television series. And yes, at first, fans weren't too sure about Next Generation, but it gained its following. It carved its own way. It cemented its own footprint and became one of the highest rated syndicated shows of all time at that particular time, from season 1 all the way to season 7, because it just got better. Some say it got better, you know, with Gene Roddenberry unfortunately having to step away because of his health. He was having health issues, but it was a creative effort to bring Star Trek to the forefront again and, still have Star Trek 5 and 6 while the Next Generation is going on. And then the Next Generation goes into feature films, and you get 4 feature films out of that. Well, you still have Deep Space Nine going, you still have Voyager going, you still have Enterprise going. I mean, 735 episodes, 10 movies. Star Trek has a deep legacy, and let's not forget the books. There are plenty of Star Trek books written by people like Peter David, among others, that you can pick up, that you can find on eBay, find on Amazon, and read. Yes, a lot of those books aren't canon unless they're written by somebody who's written for the show, but the material's out there. I mean, I have 3 different editions of Star Trek the Encyclopedia with different information in all 3 because they keep adding and expanding the canon in Star Trek. Star Trek, like I said, still means a lot to me because it was inspirational. It gave everybody hope, gave everybody optimism, and it didn't talk to its audience like we're a bunch of morons. And Tree Rock says, when I back my car out of the garage, I play James Horner stealing the Enterprise cue from Star Trek 3 as my garage door opens while I back out of it. Scotty, the doors. I said I'm working on it. Tree Rock, if you take that car, you'll never sit in the captain's seat again. But no, I mean, that's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned it, Tree Rock. The music scores for Star Trek. You listen to a particular piece of music from the movies or even from one of the series. You know exactly what scene it is. You know what dialogue is being spoken in that scene. You can picture that scene in your head from memory. You know exactly what's happening. If it was, a scene where Picard's using diplomacy, you know exactly what he was saying. You know exactly where he was standing in that episode, whether it was on the ground in an away team mission or on the bridge of the Enterprise. You hear the original series music. You know exactly what episodes those arrangements were used. You know exactly what Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov were saying. Scotty. Because Star Trek is timeless. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Star Trek is timeless. And what makes it timeless is the current era of Star Trek that we were talking about. And the adventure continues. The Star Trek discussion will always be about the Gene Roddenberry and Rick Berman eras. It won't go into the J.J. Abrams movies. It will not go into the Alex Kurtzman secret hideout trash that's out there. And yes, I called it trash because it is trash. Star Trek is about hope, it's about optimism, it's about showing you a better future. Yes, can it get preachy? Yes, it can. But it doesn't talk down to its audience, doesn't treat us like we're infants. It gives us a choice. Did Kirk make the right decision? Did Picard make the right decision? Cisco. I mean, one episode you can always debate. Did Cisco make a good decision? Was in the pale moonlight. Brandon, the anime guy, and I talked about that episode, and we, mentioned some of the war crimes that Cisco has committed just in that episode. But the Romulans never get wind of that. The Federation never gets wind of it. I mean, look at Janeway. She's not a perfect captain. She's committed some questionable decisions. Tuvix. Was it, her decision to take a beam that was created by a transporter accident that fused both Neelix and Tuvok together to create one beam? Was it her right to separate that beam, basically killing that beam? Rock says Janeway never made a good decision. She's a traitor of the Federation. Well, there was always coffee in that nebula. Tree Rock, she wanted that coffee. And even Archer. Archer made some decisions, some very questionable decisions. Yes, Starfleet in its early days in Star Trek wasn't like it was by the time of Kirk, wasn't like it was by the time of Picard, Sisko, Janeway. But Starfleet still had some rules. But there's an episode that DJ Ronnie G and I had talked about where Archer actually takes some parts from another alien ship just so the Enterprise, Archer's Enterprise, could have warp travel again to stop a Xindi weapon. And you're not going to stop me or anyone from talking about this era of Star Trek, whether it's the original series or any other series from this era, because this is what we love. This is what I love, as I've been saying. So you'll hear me mention it here. You'll hear me mention it on Pop Talk. I'll probably mention it during a game stream if it's appropriate. Heck, play Mass Effect right now. You have actors in there who were part of Star Trek. Marina Sirtis being one of them, and Dwight Schultz being another. So you have Troy, you have Barclay. Just to name a couple of actors from Star Trek who are in there. And this channel, it's about having fun, yes, but it's also about expressing what I and so many others love. And tonight's episode is one of those episodes that I truly do love. I can watch it numerous times and not get bored of it, not get sick of it. Why? Because it's entertaining. It's thought-provoking. It makes you think, and that's what Star Trek does best. It makes you think of the numerous possibilities that are out there. Even Kirk says, Spock told me once, there are numerous possibilities. I'm not going to say the whole line, but you get the point. Star Trek is about growing. And that's what we should all do. We should always learn. We should always look for an opportunity to learn, to better ourselves. To better ourselves, not just as individuals, but as society. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody who joined me tonight for this episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, yesterday's Enterprise. Now, the next episode that we will be watching and discussing will be in a couple of weeks on the 28th at 6 p.m. Eastern. I will hopefully be joined by Cash Money 007, Baron Norman Tag, Anonymous, and DJ Ronnie G as we watch and discuss a courtroom drama episode from Next Generation, First Duty. A very good episode from the 5th season of Star Trek The Next Generation. And Tree-Rock says, if only there were some managers like James T. Kirk. Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad there aren't managers, regardless of where you work, who aren't like James T. Kirk, who would actually, help the crew out. Get in there and say, all right, let's do it. Or delegate to the crew. Okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Yeah, we don't. We don't have a Kirk. We don't have Picard. Heck, I wouldn't mind having this manager like Sisko. A manager like Sisko would have your back, but also expect the best from you. But everybody, thank you for joining again. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be talking about the episode First Duty from Next Generation at 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, tomorrow, on the 15th, which is a Sunday, in case anybody's catching this on the replay after the live stream, we will be watching and talking about Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, Richard Harris, Morgan Freeman, and the late Gene Hackman. And that's an excellent movie. I can't wait to watch it again. I know it's been a long while since Baron has watched it, and I don't know how long it's been since Cash has watched it, or any of you have watched it, but you're more than welcome to come by tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern for the watch party on Pop Talk. Again, the Cosby link will be pinned to the top of the chat on YouTube and Rumble for anyone who wishes to hop in and watch the movie along with us, commentate on the movie with us. Also, channel members, if you want to join the panel tomorrow, I will be putting the StreamYard link out there in the YouTube post section for any channel members on the YouTube side who wish to join the panel and watch and discuss the movie with us. I'll put that in the post section tonight. And again, everybody is more than welcome to join, channel members on the panel and everyone in the Cosby side of things. I wish I could show these movies on YouTube, but you know what happens when you do that. You get a copyright strike, and also your channel will get demonetized or completely terminated. And I don't want the latter to happen. But until tomorrow, folks, until the next episode of The Adventure Continues, a Star Trek discussion, this has been Mike. And I wanted to take the time to thank Spock's Friday Nights for becoming a channel member, Pack 414 channel member. Thank you very much, Spock. Really appreciate your support, brother. And we've known each other for a while now. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Of course, she's known as the Admiral on Saturday nights when it comes to The Adventure Continues, the Star Trek discussion. Lady Mist, Admiral Lady Mist. Thank you, Lady Mist, for being here. Padawannabe, thank you for being here tonight, brother. Really appreciate it. Helion, thank you for dropping by. Get yourself some food and get yourself some sleep. And also, Tree Rock, thank you for stopping by, brother. Really appreciate all the support that you give the channel. And until next time, until next time, everybody, take care and also live long and prosper.